Hello, welcome to Chile Talk. I'm Neil Davidson. I am, as always, with Pete Lee.
Hello.
We are in the same city. I'm back in sunny Santiago, very sunny. It's pretty hot.
Well, I'm actually in Valparaiso now.
Oh, we're not in the same city. There we are. Okay. Never mind. We'll let that one ride. Well, we've had an exciting night of elections in which the two front runners were as expected. They were Gabriel Boric and José Kast. Now, Pete, you said that you thought Boric didn't want to win and that Kast was not trying to win. So where do we stand?
Well, yes, I think it was a very triumphant election for both of them, and I'll tell you why. In the case of Boric, obviously he and his team are not ready to run a government, particularly in tricky economic times. Today, on the morning after the election, we saw the boost in the markets and in the peso that came from Kast being in front and looking the hot favourite now.
Right. This is even though if Kast wins, there's going to be hell to pay. I mean, there's a lot of people not going to be happy. The kind of people who like to turn out onto the streets and set fire to things aren't going to be happy, right?
Yes, although I do get the sense that people had had enough over the summer of 2019, 2020 of a lot of the street vandalism and destruction, and particularly looting. And I think there probably is an appetite for a little bit more intervention rather than some of the more ceremonial altercations that.
Okay, and this is the great strength of Kast, in fact, isn't it? That these tactics have rebounded possibly on the demonstrators because people will now want a firm hand. They want somebody who was a supporter of Pinochet. So just to fill in a bit of background information, just how big a supporter of Pinochet was Kast, you know?
Well, yes, I mean, he voted in 1989. Or was he old enough to vote at that time? He was born 55 years ago. So 30 years ago, yes, he would have been old enough to vote. Okay. I'm just trying to locate.
So you're kind of assuming he voted for Pinochet to stay in power in this big plebiscite that was held.
Oh no, I believe he said that he has been. I'm just trying to verify in my mind if it fits with the timeline, but it certainly fits with the timeline.
But this isn't a fantasy of his that he was old enough to vote to keep Pinochet. Because I mean, you know, this is something pretty surprising. Okay, for Argentinians, even let alone for people from established democracies. But I mean, I remember when Evelyn Matei was standing for, what was the last thing she stood for?
Mayoralty.
That it seemed to me pretty amazing that somebody who had voted to keep Pinochet in power back in 1988 could still be taken seriously as a democratic politician. You know, not even on grounds that, you know, this was a regime that used dogs to rape women and all that stuff. I mean, that's sufficient, obviously, but just on grounds of poor political judgment, right? Because, you know, you could surely only want Pinochet to continue then if you thought that the country just was not ready for democracy, right? And the country clearly was ready for democracy. So it shows a want of judgment, doesn't it?
Yes, it's an interesting process by which this right tendency that by and large had supported the idea of at least of Pinochet lasting until 1996 in power, I believe was the term that was being offered to him in 1988 and was knocked back by the people. The right kind of went underground politically, particularly throughout the 1990s, and starting to come back, of course, with Piñera winning an election in 2010.
And he was untainted. He was untainted, wasn't he? Insofar as he voted no to Pinochet staying in power.
Yes,
big selling point, really.
Yes, but obviously a lot of these figures did vote yes,
and they and all they did was they kind of like waited a certain amount of time, and then came back. Kind of thing. It was like they were kind of I mean, a lot of them were always in Congress, whatever, but like to stand for like major offices like the presidency. They just sort of waited until everybody had kind of forgotten, I suppose. But then, but he's proud of his association. He says Pinochet was, more democratic than, sorry, it's a mental blank spot here. Pinochet, unlike Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, Pinochet allowed elections. So
Yes.
he's not embarrassed, is he, about liking Pinochet?
No, he's not, and there's quite a lot of people who aren't. They see Pinochet as having saved the country in 1973 and sort of seen the task through to a point at which a kind of guided democracy could be resumed. I think that there is an authenticity to owning up to who you voted for in 1988 as a young adult, and what that means now, 30 years later. I don't see it as this, anathema.
And well, clearly not, because we are kind of pretty much predicting that, over 50% of voters are going to probably vote for him, aren't they, in the second round?
Yes, it's what it's looking like. I mean, it would seem like a big triumph for Kast, because he had votes he can count on from other right-wingers and perhaps even centrists. There's even just a simply anti-communist vote coming from certain sectors of the left. And of course, Boric is aligned with the communists in Apruebo Dignidad. So it was a big triumph for Kast, but I also think it was a big triumph for Boric. And the reason I think it's a big triumph.
Okay, yep, that's it. That's your reasoning. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think Boric achieved the primary objective, which is making sure not only he does not win the presidency, he signals a month in advance before the final runoff election that he's not going to win, which is the decent thing for the economy. It's the decent thing for everyone. And perhaps it gives Kast some time to negotiate a more coherent program that's more acceptable to everyone. And I feel that Boric has achieved a kind of honourable loss and not completely lost all credibility for his movement. One worry I do have for the Frente Amplio brand is it's such a personality cult, and some of the biggest personalities are falling by the wayside, such as Karina Oliva, for example, who was recently done for corruption, along with the top brass of the entire Comunes movement, which is one of the parties that makes up Frente Amplio. I think Boric has done about as well as he can, given all the minor scandals, and perhaps the teething problems of creating a viable coalition platform to run for president entail.
Yeah, so I see. So you're saying that he didn't really want to win because basically he knows he couldn't run the country.
Yes.
And if that's so, that bespeaks a kind of meta maturity, as it were, because lots of people can't run a country, they don't realize it. That bespeaks a kind of a certain statesman-like quality in him. Because I mean, here he was a bit of a dark horse, wasn't he? I mean, he was a very well-known figure, but he was not the obvious front runner, was he? To lead the coalition. And
no,
he might well think this is my only chance. Surely most politicians would not be able to resist like just lunging for it, right?
Yes, you would think not. In this case, in the primary to select the Apruebo Dignidad candidate, that is between Frente Amplio and the Communist Party, basically, the mainstream Communist Party, there were almost as many votes between the two candidates Boric received. Boric received around 1.8 million votes in the first round of the presidential election, and there was around that many in the primary, which suggests either that a lot of people who are not interested in Pueblo Dignidad voted in their primary, or Pueblo Dignidad was incapable of interesting many people beyond, their signed-on interest groups. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense. But sorry, you're saying that, wait a minute, the votes for him in this first round of the presidential election. Oh, right, because you got a quarter of the vote, roughly, right? Yeah, yes. Yeah. So you're saying that a total of about 7 odd bit more million votes were cast. I see. So as many people voted for him in the Frente Amplio, in the Pueblo Digno, I get them mixed up, primary, as voted
for him and Highway together. And yes.
Got it. So there was that. Yeah. So what you're saying is that's a very good point. So all the people who voted in the primary there voted for him and nobody else. That's an extraordinary because the fact that the primary, so many people turned out to vote in that primary, made it look as if this movement was kind of pretty absolutely enormous and unstoppable, right? Because you think, my God, if so many people vote for him in the primary, he's going to like sweep the general election. But just the same old people turned out and nobody else. That's remarkable, actually, isn't it? It's probably unprecedented in a democracy.
Yes. Well, I actually have a theory about this kind of left aesthetic that could be Frente Amplio, or could be the younger version of the Communist Party, or could be whatever left aesthetic is going on. If the Chileans select it, it will be a matter of an economy going really well and shouting itself a left aesthetic government, rather than turning to one in more dire economic straits. So I could very well see this generation of Frente Amplio leaders, perhaps the next half generation down, taking over one day, but it will be after economic growth is re-established and
right. And Boric could very well have a second bite at the cherry, couldn't he? I mean, he's young, he's done very respectably. So he could well be positioning himself for another attempt, which, if so, as I say, does indicate a kind of patience and maturity, which his youthful and slightly sort of gawky appearance kind of belie, really.
Yes, he's not done badly in his role, but I do tend to see it as a role.
Got it. And you also said that Kast wasn't trying to win. So why wasn't he trying to win? I mean, having gone to all the effort of standing, and as he said in his speech last night, a path not without sacrifices. I mean, it's a lot of hard work to get as far as he's got, isn't it? Why do it if you don't want to win?
Well, I mean, he's got as far as he's got because he's been able to indulge heavily in authenticity. But now, to make sure that he packs away those few extra votes, takes over more space in the centre, he's going to have to, if not dilute, at least garnish his authenticity with a bit of magnanimity, let's say. I actually think the smartest thing he could do is just spend the next month reminding everybody that he voted against having a constitutional convention, but the people voted for it, and he will support the constitutional convention. Of course, the dog whistle there would be, even though the constitutional convention is going so badly, I'm going to support it. And I think that would be the nicest message he could make on the most levels to unify people behind him. Maybe.
Okay, interesting stuff. And and a big surprise was old Enrique Parisi, the candidate over the water, who never left the United States for various reasons.
You seem to have a kind of guru-like insight into his attractiveness at the national level.
Well, yeah, I suggest it's because he doesn't pay his child support, and that most Chilean men don't, and so they have this feeling of kinship with him that I suppose if he's the president, then that kind of excuses them. If even the president doesn't pay child support, but who knows? It's probably more prosaic. I mean, his big vote was in the north, wasn't it? And he stood on this very big anti-immigration or whatever, yeah, anti-controlled immigration platform, which obviously resonates in the north because where people just walk over the border. And I mean, it's complete chaos up there. The Bolivian army crosses the border to steal cars. You know, I mean, it's just a mess. You know, it's happened constantly. And there was actually a bit of a, not a far fight. I don't know if you read this bit of news, not long ago, just a few weeks. The Chilean army went into border patrol, went into hot pursuit of the Bolivian army who'd just stolen some wretch's car, you know, and there was an armed standoff. It is totally ridiculous, you know, I mean, absolute third world stuff. So this is a border that's totally porous, you know, people just walking over the desert. And of course, a bunch of people in Iquique not long ago set fire, sort of rounded on a big group of immigrants, including some children with their rather pathetic belongings, kind of tents, whatever, you know, baby clothes, whatever, baby grow bags, whatever they had. I'm sounding very flippant about this, but you know, it's horrible. I mean, they set fire to all this stuff, you know, which of course is pretty brutish. But at the same time, the issue of immigration has been totally ignored, hasn't it? I mean, it's just been rather has happened in, you know, in the States, in Britain, but even more so.
Yes.
So it's a big issue up there.
Well, there's not a lot of technical capacity in terms of developing immigration policy. There's generally very little tradition of immigration policy. In the case of Argentina, which was such a huge recipient of immigrants, their idea of helping immigrants was simply having a kind of immigrant hostel for them to stay in for a couple of weeks before they went out to get a job. And it's there's a lot of investing in migration if Chile wants to come to terms with the opportunities available.
Or indeed to stem it either. And this actually points towards really what was so horribly wrong, what still is, of course, he's still in the game. What is so horribly wrong with Boric's program, which is there's nothing intrinsically unreasonable about raising the tax take by 8% of GDP, having a bigger state. Chile's got a small state, you know, it could have a much bigger state. That's the way countries tend to go. But the Chilean state is just not equipped to handle a deluge of extra money. It's just not equipped for, and it's not equipped to raise the money, and it's not equipped to handle the money if it could raise it. I mean, that's the thing. It would have to be introduced much more gradually, wouldn't it?
I think so. I think so. I mean, the concept of gradualism or the incremental path or muddling through is discussed almost in the newspapers in Chile. You know, these are considered to be at least, if not quite social science, then kind of MBA standard concepts. And in Chile, there is this technocratic discourse about things, and gradualism is one of them. And of course, the term gradualism acknowledges the need for the need to do things slowly in a particular cultural context.
That's it.
So
That's it.
I think there are Chileans who know this.
Including possibly the electorate, and maybe this could be a big part of the explanation for why people, despite there must be so many people must find the idea attractive of more state in such a poor country where there is wealth to be tapped, but I guess they just, you know, they just don't trust, you know, it's kind of, I think in most countries voters suddenly show the great fear about democracy in general was always that the voters would just vote themselves goodies, wasn't it? And of course they do vote themselves goodies, but there's a remarkable vein in all electorates, it seems, of kind of conservatism, of like disbelief in the likelihood of government really improving things that much.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the Chileans seem to like the Chilean state, but they probably like it the way it is, with not that much money to put about, not that many unrealistic claims on what it can do for people. We'll just have to see.
Okay, well, on that note, anyway, we should probably wrap up. This is just a brief reflection on last night's results, and I'm sure we'll be returning to this topic over the coming weeks.
Absolutely. We might even get together one time.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Get out the old camera, you know, and the tripod. That's right. This is much more convenient.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all very much for watching.
Thank you.